Let's get into our conversation today because we're going to spend the whole hour that we have talking about Pasco. I've got two great men in the studio today. We have the Pasco Mayor, Matt Watkins, and I really appreciate, Matt, that you are here. And Matt was so kind to bring along the City Manager, Dave Zabell. Did I say your last name correct?
Yes.
Yes, good. So I have talked to several different city folks from the various cities around the Tri-Cities from time to time here on the show, and now it's Pasco's turn. I have a long list of questions. I'll tell you what, folks, if you have questions or you want to make comments, we would be happy to add you to our conversation today. And let me remind you of that number. It is 547-8726. So let me just start with what all cities are involved in these days seems to be economic development, getting more jobs for people who live in the community, and also increasing and stabilizing a tax base. So tell me, what is Pasco up to?
You want to start, Dave?
Yeah, I can start, Mayor. Thank you. So obviously the most recent and noteworthy project is Road 68. And I think people have seen what's happened out there over the last decade plus. Very healthy growth from a commercial standpoint, a lot of jobs, a lot of economic activity, and there's been a lot of impacts. And the council's been very committed over the past few years to making some improvements out there. We did do some last year in terms of channelization, which has served to cut down mid-block accidents by about 50%. So the project overall has been a success, but there's much more work to do out there. We're looking at better access off and on to Interstate I-82, and so we have a triple right turn project starting up. We have a a double right turn westbound onto I-82 that's cranking up, and those folks that drive that every day will, I think,
particularly the folks who are heading west on Burden in the morning and want to go to the freeway. That triple left turn lane would be a big improvement.
Yeah, they're going to appreciate the value of those projects. And then there's another one, probably not as obvious, the value of it to folks that don't live in the area, but the extension of Wrigley, I think is going to create some alternative routing for folks so they don't have to rely everyone that will not have to rely on Road 68 specific. Is going to give you a back route up the back. It's also going to open up some new properties to some higher volume traffic and through traffic, so that's going to create value there and most likely result in some more development.
Well, where is Wrigley? First tell me that.
Oh, it's, my apologies, it's the route just to the, it's an east-west route that'll tie up with, I think it's called Convention Drive, just to the east of Road 68.
It would be the one just a little bit past Arby's in that area.
Okay, so certainly a lot of road modifications to get people into commercialized areas or residential areas quicker, easier. What else are you doing? What about downtown Pasco?
So downtown Pasco, yeah, I'll touch on that. That obviously with the Lewis Street overpass, replacement of the old underpass, is driving a lot downtown, and there's been considerable effort by the council in terms of some prep work this last couple of years on outreach. We see a whole redevelopment of that downtown area from a streetscape standpoint, furniture, lighting, those kind of things. Peanuts Park is in our budget for 2016. Council will be acting on that budget tonight, but getting the design and construction plans ready for that for 2017 construction.
Oh, okay, so 2017 is when it's supposed to start.
Yeah, but we'll be doing a lot of work next year because we need to do it right. I mean, that park is right, that is the heart of downtown. And thematically, culturally, architecturally, that park is going to set the tone for what the rest of downtown will be built up as with the newer improvements. We want to take advantage of the work that's been done out there with the facade program and those kind of things, and what's happening with private investment out there. As well as make sure that the circulation for our transportation system gels well into the Lewis Street overpass and provides great access for East Pasco into downtown as well as points west.
There's a real opportunity with significant budget dollars with a lot of the money that we have received for the overpass to then be able to think about downtown in a little bit larger perspective, not just 4th and Lewis, but that whole corridor that's in Lewis Street that extends to the railroad tracks and to the folks in the east part of Pasco. There's an opportunity there, and he mentioned Peanuts Park, but you do redo the streetscape to an extent and kind of update that. There's a real opportunity there, but that's not a small project, so that's why it's something that's on that kind of 2-year time frame.
And the Lewis Street overpass project itself, the game changer on that was this transportation package, brought $26 million to that project. It's not enough to complete it all, but it gets us within striking distance of completing it. And we have funding partners we're already talking to about wanting to be some of the last dollars in, so it's really exciting. So we're in a different spot than we were even a year ago, in that Lewis Street overpass is a reality.
It only took 20 years.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, it's been a sore spot for a long time. So we cannot talk about Pasco downtown and its redevelopment and all of that without talking about the recent situation where the executive director of that organization was arrested on embezzlement charges and upwards of perhaps even $90,000 absconded with. So, and that is still, although he has admitted it, Michael Goines. What is the city's relationship with this organization? Was he a city employee?
No, he was an employee of the Downtown Public Development Authority, which is an organization that the city authorized. And it's one of those organizations that you can do under state law. Their appointments to a board, there's a board that I do as mayor and ratified by council, and there's a financial autonomy with that group, but then also they also ask and get some city support. So there is a very close relationship, but they are a separate organization. But I think it's also fair to say that we're also thinking about that, and it hurts me to think that there has been that thing happen, and I'm sure we're going to have to work through that because the need for downtown is still there. It doesn't matter if somebody has gone to be a mayor or not. We still need to do stuff downtown, and this certainly makes it a little bit more difficult to do.
It does, but not impossible,
Exactly.
as you mentioned. But will there be new, so I take it that there was no responsibility for audit, that the city did not say to this organization, we require you to show us a satisfactory audit on an annual basis?
Actually, the Washington State Auditor's Office audits that organization.
Okay. And when was the last time they were audited? So nothing was discovered during
Nothing
that
was
process?
discovered. I don't know if they're an every other year
Okay.
audit or if they're an every year audit. I couldn't tell you that.
Well, according to the information that we had, they did have one that was submitted in 2014, but it was not, from what we know, a fine-tooth comb comprehensive. There are certain benchmarks or areas of what they call highest risk, that if someone were to abscond with money, where would the highest risk areas be? And the auditor's office looked at these key points, but they didn't go through the entire thing, and they think that in lower level areas that are not as often checked, that's probably where it occurred. Because apparently with these things, unfortunately, if someone is very clever and very smart, there are ways to get around audits, especially if it's not a comprehensive. It was a thorough audit, but it mainly looked at what they called, quote, high-risk areas.
I would agree with that. The auditor does not have the resources to do that kind of audit on every agency that they're responsible for in the state, including all the cities, the counties, and so forth.
Well, what do you think as a community that we learn from background checks and all? Every situation like this, we have to take some kind of we got to learn something from it. What do you learn from that?
I think, well, first of all, we're kind of evaluating what did occur and what didn't occur when he was hired. And so that's still being looked at. We're going to be working with the board over the next couple weeks to have a chat about that. And then what can the city do to help shore that process up going forward?
Yeah, because as pointed out, it is absolutely critical that downtown has the resources it needs to do the things it needs to do. But at the same time, it can't abscond with money, and so we're going to want to make sure, because Pasco is also heavily invested in that, and there's taxpayer money. So we want to make sure that the Pasco taxpayers' money is protected. And my understanding also is that there is going through an auditor, or excuse me, a financial person was brought on to go look through the details, and so that's all part of that investigation.
So you mean the board members did that? Brought on somebody?
The board is brought on.
Yeah, okay, the board.
Accounting firm.
All right, so what is the Pasco City annual budget? How much is that? What?
Could I back up just
Oh.
one thing? I did want
Oh.
to make a comment on DPDA, and that's, you know, we met, matter of fact, Friday afternoon. And, you know, coming out of this, you know, this has been very disappointing, I think, for the board members and the community, and certainly the city council, city officials. But we can't let it stop our progress, as the mayor said. And, you know, one of the questions we were wrestling with last week was, do we go forward with the downtown Christmas holiday program? And we are. You know, we decided there's no way that's something like this is gonna stop that from happening. And so, groups like Consejo Latino and LULAC and the city and others have jumped right up. Some of our community leaders, like PDI, you know, Mr. Dietrich and Bob Tippett have come forward, and I think we're gonna have a great event down there. And don't ask me the date and time, I'll text somebody and get it for you.
Hey, that's why they have
End of
social
show.
media and Facebook page, you know?
We better find out. Before the end of the program is over, we will find out when the Christmas program is. I think I saw it on Facebook, but I don't recall either. But that's a really, really good piece of information. We are going to take a break here, and when we come back, we have a lot of questions to ask these gentlemen, and we'll take yours as well. Stay with us here on Meet in the Middle. We're talking about the city of Pasco. We have Mayor Matt Watkins. We also have City Manager Dave Zabell. If you have a question, comment, give us a call, 547-8726. I want to jump forward to, we were just talking about it during the break and looking at the difference in population. So in a 15-year period, you've gone from about 35,000 to 70,000 to double population in a time period like this. I think is pretty unusual for cities, isn't it?
It is, and that's why we've been, I think, doing a really good job at keeping up with that sort of thing. But as I think we've been learning with Dave, we've been doing a little bit of deferred maintenance here and there, and so we need to catch up. Now the growth rates are just plain hot instead of blisteringly hot.
Oh, they're still hot though, huh?
Yeah, I don't know the exact statistics, but new home purchases and construction, the permit numbers are in the hundreds still, if I remember.
Yeah, back in the heyday, 10 years
Mhm.
ago,
Mhm.
1,000 single-family building permits per year,
Yeah,
which is incredibly high. I mean, that's double Seattle.
right.
And-
That was incredible.
And so right now we're at about, probably looking at 300 this year, which is
Oh.
still very good
Very
clip for a
significant.
community our size. Yeah. It's a
Well,
good indicator.
So what you had to do though was create these impact fees. And I think I told you that, Matt, on the phone before. When I talk with real estate people, they don't like you. They're very unhappy about that, and they want those impact fees reduced because we also need more housing in the Tri-Cities in general. You know, we only have about 800 houses available for folks to consider. So anyway, what's
Yeah.
going on with the impact
Well,
fees?
when you have that 1,000 homes a year sort of thing, it impacted schools tremendously, and the schools said, hey, we need to have something to do this, because to build new schools, the capital expenses is not accounted for in the budgeting process, especially with budgets that are tax bound by the 1% property tax initiative, and school districts are almost exclusively property tax. So they came to us and the county and said, you can't keep building because we can't sustain this level. So we actually went through a very deliberate process and said to build new schools, and directly because of all that development, here's the cost that needs to be accounted for, and then we discounted it about half. So I think we went through a very deliberate process, and nobody likes impact fees, but I think they're fair and reasonable, and it's also something that gets reevaluated every 2 or 3 years.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years? Well, give me an example of an impact fee. Let's say, is it based on the house cost, or like if it's a $200,000 home, or what?
Well, an impact fee, you've got to build street lights and streets and parks, and I think the a park impact fee is probably in the $500 range.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, and that's to build a park that goes along with the house that's down the street. And then you've got to have all those collector arterials, so the street lights have to be paid for. And so the Pasco and all the other cities do have impact fees. It's the school impact fee that's the newest and only one in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah, I know, but
Oh.
tell me some dollars.
Okay.
So the
Tell me
school-
some
the school
dollar
impact
amounts so I
fee
can.
is approaching $5,000 per housing unit.
Per housing unit?
Yes.
$5,000. So if a home that I wanted to purchase was $200,000, I'd be paying $205,000 for it.
Yes, and the true cost is probably $210,000.
And so, just on a practical basis, how does that work? Does it fold into my mortgage and you get the money up front, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's going to be depending on each individual, how you finance your home.
I
Yeah,
see.
I mean, it's certainly would qualify, impact fees qualify as something you can finance at home loan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would, you know, there, as Mayor alluded to, there are a number of different impact fees out there. There's, you know, what they call general facility charges for water and sewer, and there's traffic impact fees and park impact fees, and, and Pasco is extremely competitive in the city impact fees. It's a school district impact fee, definitely is higher than what you normally see.
Mm-hmm. All right, so have you, by receiving these impact fees, has it helped you? How close has it gotten to what the need was?
Well, to be clear, those impact fees go immediately over to the school district.
Okay, they
So-
go
so
directly to the schools.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
come to the city. Okay.
They come to the city, but
Yeah,
the city then
okay.
remits them to the school district, and it's what, about $1 million a year or so
Approximately.
currently.
Wow. Okay.
So that is an impact, and I don't, but when you have, what is it, $60 million to build a high school, $1 million is a pretty small amount when you're talking about building grade schools and middle schools. And one of the things that Pasco did do is we agreed to adopt a uniform policy that says any new development that occurs, it's going to be this per housing unit or apartment unit. But in the county, they have to negotiate that deal individually, and so we thought there was a streamlining bit of process there that would you wouldn't have to spend as much money on overhead to have a single impact fee.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of having input in the fee, though, there's two places to do it. One is the school district itself does the study, the evaluation, the analysis, and they have their own public process that they go through to do that, and they come up with the number. That eventually gets forwarded to the council, and then the council's asked to act on it as well. So there's two different bites at the apple. You have it at the school district, where it's actually being evaluated, and you have it at the council, where they're making a policy decision.
Okay. It's interesting
And
that
it-
you're basically doing the work of the school district, so they can't up the property tax dollar amount, so they
And I
get
think
an
that, well, that larger
impact.
picture, Washington's shifted over more from a
Interesting.
tax system to a fee system, and so that it is more directly attributable to that activity instead of having a large jar of peanut butter that just spread around.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is, so what, $695 is 20 years in the making, and it limits property tax to 1% or inflation, whichever is lower. And we know that inflation often exceeds 1%. So the purchasing power for property tax is significantly less for jurisdictions in the state than it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, housing developers are having to be part of that, have to pay for part of that, because that's a shift to a fee system.
Are there any new housing residential developments going on in Pasco? I mean, big ones right
Yeah,
now?
there's a number, there's probably about 300 lots under construction right now. And then-
300
Yeah,
lots
probably
under
300 under
construction?
construction right
Wow,
now,
okay.
and then
Mhm.
there's several hundred in the pipeline.
Wow, okay. So it's still
And
very
yeah,
strong.
It is strong. It didn't go to zero, and it didn't stay to 100%. But I think overall, one of the predictions we thought was that impact fees might have about a 30% reduction in building of new homes, and that's probably what the home developers are. They'd like to still have the full 100% development, and I understand that.
Yeah, it's very difficult to look, because if you look at the chart and the experience over the past decade, you'll see numbers are tripled a decade ago. Different economy, different demands for houses at that point in time. So to try to say how much of it is impact fee related in terms of our numbers today, and how much more would they be without that impact fee, I don't know that there's the expertise out there to say that. Probably there would be more houses. How many more is difficult to predict.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pasco is this interesting blend of old and new, and we just barely talked about it on the phone, Matt, when we were discussing what you were going to be talking about here. I mean, all the Road 68, all of that is like brand new. It's like sprung up out of a desert almost. Took the place of a lot of hay fields over there. And then we have the old, which is more of the downtown Pasco area and all of the original housing developments there. How do you manage an old and new? I mean, you got two different things going on.
Well, I think Dave's going to have to talk about the management part, and I'm excited because I think that adds to the flavor of Pasco. And one of the reasons, and I grew up in Kennewick myself, but I chose to do my first home in Pasco because I love the diversity of the town, and I think that old and new is going to add to the flavor of the mix, not only Pasco, but the Tri-Cities. As far as managing it, well, that's why we hire folks like Dave. So how do we manage it, Dave?
Well, it's kind of interesting because, you know, you're looking at the new areas. They have brand new streets, brand new utilities, those type of things. And then there's growth-related impacts we're dealing out there with those folks because of intersections that weren't part of the development or roads that weren't. And so you're putting dollars in there to try to make that work out in those areas. And you have the downtown, or not downtown, but the older part of town where everything's curb gutter and sidewalk. The streets are narrower than what our new developments are.
Right.
They have alleys. We don't have alleys out there, so there's added costs with alleys. Matter of fact, we were just closing in on a project council started several years ago to pave all the alleys. Yeah, it's hard to
Pave
think,
all the alleys?
it's hard to think about the 21st
Why?
century. Well,
Why?
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 Yeah, you
Wow.
cut down on dust. It's easier to maintain. It's a lot of maintenance to have a gravel alley.
Ah, wow.
Come
Okay,
in,
that's
my
interesting.
first home was an alley, and that gravel was a
Mhm.
pain. And to have a paved alley, it makes a big difference, I think, also in aesthetics, and you know, also putting your garbage can out because you do it on the back side of the house.
The backside, okay.
So living in a house, you're right. There is a difference in philosophies, and if you're in Central Pasco versus if you're out at Road 100, which is where I ended up moving to about 10 years ago. And the choice of housing stock is tremendous in the diversity in Pasco.
Yeah, the character makes it actually pretty fascinating. The old street trees downtown. Now we're having to take some of those out because they're so old, they're hollow inside. You know, so we actually have a project taking some of them out, replacing them with new ones. And you're starting to see some of the neighborhoods that developed 10, 15 years ago in the west part of town. Those trees now starting to mature and really add a lot of value to the properties that they're close to. So it's, you know, one of the other things that's kind of interesting, just in my line of work, the managing of it is, you know, you'll hear folks talk about we're having to put money in the infrastructure out here because we built all those houses out there. But there's also another side of that. Your infrastructure is really old, and all that new
Right.
growth out there is helping to pay for renewal of some of the old infrastructure that continues to age every year in the older parts of town. So there's probably no perfect system, but there is two sides to every story when it comes to those type of things. And I think as a community, the city's done a very good job of trying to balance that.
A prime example, Kurtzman Park area over by Martin Luther King and the eastern side of town never had curb and gutter for years, but through a little bit of federal grant and a little bit of skin in the game from local homeowners, we did put curb and gutter, and it's amazing how much improved those neighborhoods look, and folks who live in those neighborhoods appreciate having the same amenities as other parts of town. So keeping everything within a range of civic development, I think, is critically important for Pasco.
We're going to take a break here. When we come back, I cannot let these two gentlemen go without talking about the Zambrano shooting case and what is next for the city of Pasco. You're listening to Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown. Stay with us.
I think is worth talking about is that we have made a lot of progress. There's been a lot of additional training throughout the year. I mean, our police officers each have gone through, I think, this year, 200 hours of training,
Wow.
individually, every one of them. And I think noteworthy through this process is this dialogue of inclusion is opened up. I don't know that dialogue was necessarily happening on a consistent basis, but I think, you know, prior to this incident, but the council has worked really hard on it, and the community's worked hard on it. I think we're having discussions that we weren't having a few years ago.
Exactly.
You know, right now, and I think that's going to lead to some really good things over the long term. Throw out a statistic. You know, we've been able to make some tweaks to our civil service rules in terms of valuing bilingual skills from our incoming officers, and right now I think our bilingual officer count jumped from 11 or 12 in March of last year to 19 this year. So that's a pretty significant increase in our bilingual officers. We have,
That's huge.
yeah, and I know we have one in the pipeline right now that I just signed papers on that'll be starting here pretty quickly, so we should hit the 20 mark before the end of the year.
And 200 hours of training is extremely difficult to do for a department when you also have to basically stay on the streets.
Well, this is a department that has one police officer per 1,000 ratio, which
Mhm.
they're a very busy department as a result of it. And then our 3 officers involved in the shooting were on admin leave for most of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of overtime, and great opportunity. I think, I know the mayor will agree that our department just performed admirably over the past 10 months, working through this crisis, and they put the effort in. They've been very understanding of the community and trying to work with them and build those bridges back up.
Mm-hmm. Do you do citizen surveys to see what people think of city government or their police officers or anything like that?
Yes, actually, we've been doing that every 2 years for a while now, and I believe the survey is going out now, or will be.
It should be going out any day.
Yeah, it should be going out any day, and that goes to a random sampling statistically ballot. This year, we threw in the option that if anybody wants to optionally do the survey, they can submit it, and then we'll actually keep track of that slightly differently than the random sampling, so that we have maintain not only a statistically accurate survey, but also, again, anybody who wants to go through an effort to do that, we're going to be able to read through those results as well.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, also it's bilingual, so it'll be Spanish and English. And I think the other point, just to, for folks that might be listening, is a lot of citizen surveys are done based on voter registration records. This is actually done based on utility accounts. So voter registration, this is about people that live here, people that contribute here, and call Pasco their home.
Okay, well, let's take a break here. Our phone number here is 547-8726. My guests right now are from the city of Pasco. We have the mayor, Matt Watkins. We have the city manager, Dave Zabell. Another question that I had on my list here was I really wanted to know from both of you what you see as Pasco's biggest asset and biggest challenge. Let me start with the mayor.
I think I hit a little bit with it. One of the reasons, the big reasons I moved to Pasco, and I joke about it, but it's serious. Part of the reason I moved to Pasco is the good taco trucks. And
oh, I agree.
And comes with that, there's a diversity in Pasco that I really appreciate and like being in a community like that. The challenge comes on the flip side because there's also, Pasco is different than the Tri-Cities socioeconomically. There are more kids per household, so the schools have a bigger challenge. So at the same time, there's a strength. I think there's a challenge when you want to be able to go out and build something really cool, maybe that Richland can afford. There's a little bit more of a challenge at Pasco, and I think that's because our property, our assessed value per person is lower. So we make do with a Buick, and some of our peer cities have a little bit more tax base.
Right.
Kennewick's done incredible jobs with the retail sector, so we have all of these inherent challenges, but I think also that gap, especially the 10 to 12 years, has been closing. If housing prices are more comparable to other parts in the Tri-Cities, that's also a sign of success that you're having a little wider tax base. And there's also Road 68 at the same time that there's traffic, which is difficult. That's also a success because that's less taxes that folks are going to pay because of the sales tax coming in. So I think all those both sides of the coin are the greatest. That are sometimes strongest, are also some of the most difficult.
Would you build a aquatic center, please?
That's a great subject. And I think that's going to be the next subject for the Tri-City discussion too. Yes. It's not just an aquatics facility. I think this community is going to have a serious discussion about a variety of projects. Performing arts, I think you're a little bit of talking about that in Kennewick. Aquatics facility, I think still most Pasco folks like to do an aquatics facility. Can we as the Tri-Cities still build regional facilities and do a governance and pay for things in a way? And I think that question is going to come back again, as our economy has also been pretty healthy.
Yes, it has. All right, manager, what is your asset and challenge?
Well, I talked about the people, which I really think the folks in this community and how they pull together and how they react to things, I think is a huge asset to us. The mayor talked a little bit about, when he said community a minute ago, he was talking about the Tri-Cities. Yes. And I think the fact that the 3 cities, and West Richland, the 4 cities, work together so closely in such close partnership, that is a huge asset, not only for Pasco, but for the entire region. And that was one thing when I interviewed for the job that the mayor talked about quite a bit during that interview. Was this isn't 3 cities in competition with each other. This is 3 cities in partnership with each other. So I believe that's an excellent asset. And then, you know, the council, the community has moved the needle in a lot of areas. Not only has the population doubled in the last 15 years, but our assessed valuation actually has doubled from $2 billion to $4 billion from 2007 to today.
Wow.
And
okay.
so, yeah, there is some really good progress, and as that progress, you know, economically comes forward, the number of jobs we have, and we didn't get to talk all about economic development, and hopefully we can touch on a couple of things in a few minutes along those lines, go back to it, but those kind of resources start to let you do more things that weren't thinkable 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So, what's the best resource? You know, all of it is. I can't point to one thing. I just think things are really moving in the right direction for the community.
That's the sense I have as well. And I really appreciate your leadership, the two of you, and I hope that you will share that with the other council members, because it's kind of sometimes, quite frankly, a thankless job. So let me tell you right here, Matt, you are appreciated.
And I'm going to pass that along to the other council members, because them choosing and say, hey, you're running point on the meetings and get to do an hour-long interview with Christine Brown. That's a perk of the job, certainly, but there are 6 other council members that are excited about the future of Pasco as well.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back in just a moment here. Stay with us.